Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Thrive in China Roundtable. The Thrive in China Roundtable is a series of roundtables that we host every single Wednesday on a variety of different topics that are relevant currently in the market. Today, we're going to be talking about Asia Direct, building up a direct import program from Hong Kong. So stay tuned for that. Just again, for those of you that are newcomers to our roundtable, allow me to just introduce myself and our firm. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is a leading inbound investment advisory firm. We only help foreign investors enter the Hong Kong and Chinese markets. Our services entail all of the administrative and bureaucratic services that range from trademark registrations all the way through to company setup, and then administering the activities of those companies, whether it's handling trade documentation, whether it's doing the accounting, the tax, the payroll, corporate governance, internal health checks, audits, etc. It's really making sure that your companies that you set up in these two jurisdictions are in compliant and above par. A little bit about myself. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. We are a family-owned business. It was started by my father many, many years ago. He has since retired, but it is now my brother and I who are leading the reins both in Hong Kong and China. My brother Sven is based in Hong Kong. I'm based in Europe, managing our Shanghai operations. I have helped in the last 20 years or so, over 750 companies across a variety of different industries and sectors with their market entry, implementation, and ongoing administration of their companies, focusing really on growth and scale. If you guys are interested in connecting with me, I'm a big believer in building a network in the region. I've got my WeChat QR code up here. You can scan it. It will pop up again at the end of the presentation, but feel free to connect with me. So today's topic is about Asia Direct, building a direct import program via Hong Kong. And I really wanted to start off today's presentation by telling everybody that we have a guest speaker on today. So we've got Mark Headley from Invest Hong Kong, who is also going to be sharing what Invest Hong Kong does and how it can support foreign companies coming into Hong Kong. So he's going to build off of my presentation and talk about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of today. But I'm very thrilled to have him on here as a support to what we are trying to build for clients in Hong Kong right now. So maybe I'll start with a little bit of gloom and doom. If you read articles on the future of Hong Kong in the next 12 months, it really does look like gloom and doom. However, having just spent 3 weeks on the ground there myself, I want to remain optimistic and look at certain trends in individual sectors and industries. So if we look solely at exports, Hong Kong exports are expected to grow between 4 to 6% within 2024. This is a sharp contrast to the 11% decline that was recorded between January and October 2023. Now, this optimistic outlook is supposedly being driven by the significant increase in demand for electronic components. Partly, the demand is coming from AI-enabled devices and finished products, and the city is actually renowned for its electrical components and its network to suppliers within Asia that are producing electronics and electrical components. So again, really this high-tech demand is there. I also want to emphasize, I've had my team in Hong Kong attend the trade shows in 2023, and honestly, it's been a joy and a surprise to see a large amount of new visitors come into the country and attend these trade shows. meeting with potential suppliers, sales agents, distributors, sourcing agents, etc. So I am quite optimistic to see how 2024 will come about. But just to finish on what we're seeing as market trends, I also want to give you what Woodburn has seen from its own clientele. And I want to start off by saying the COVID period, quite frankly, sucked. From 2020 to 2022, we saw no new clients establishing themselves in Hong Kong. Now, Invest Hong Kong might have very different stats because they're looking at Hong Kong as a whole region. But from our perspective, looking at clients that were approaching us, no new clients came. However, in 2023, there was a sudden boom of inquiries that really took us by surprise, and quite a few incorporations as well. And I wanted to highlight to you the sectors that this is coming from and the reasons why these clients were establishing themselves in Hong Kong. The first two are related to today's topic. So both of these companies are electronics companies, funnily enough. So if we are looking at the trend that electronics is growing in Hong Kong and within the region, these are two electronics companies. One of them is from Mexico. They have a sourcing network of over 250 suppliers in Asia. Their issue was that they could not control this anymore from Mexico. They needed to have an entity in Hong Kong to be able to centralize all of the orders that were being placed to these suppliers throughout Asia, majority coming from China. Their intention initially was to set something up in China, but lo and behold, they found Hong Kong a more attractive option. And we actually built this direct import program for them to centralize all of their purchasing orders through Hong Kong, being able now to ship directly to customers throughout the Americas, as well as to their own operations in Mexico. The second company is a US company that has one extremely big supplier, being Apple. They buy all of the leftover accessories, so cables, what other types of accessories there might be from Apple that are no longer going to be distributed. They buy that to be able to then resell globally. And Apple has a stipulation. And this is something that I think we're going to see more and more of, is that suppliers are going to give a certain level of power to say, we will only contract with you if you are local. And this is exactly what Apple has done. They have said, if you want to buy from our Hong Kong operations, you need to have a Hong Kong structure and entity. If you want to buy from our China operations, you need a China entity. So they are kind of forced into the situation to have these structures on the ground. And again, they are buying from Apple in each of these individual jurisdictions. And they're kind of forced by Apple to do this all over the world to localize their businesses. And I do see this as an ultimate trend that companies may have to localize if they want to work with customers or suppliers around the world. The third company, interestingly enough, does recruitment. And it's a UK company. They are seeing that they are having much bigger projects, recruitment projects, headhunting projects in Asia. And they decided ultimately to set up a Hong Kong entity to be able to invoice locally to those structures within Asia. These companies in Asia are looking to localize and also work with local headhunting firms versus UK companies. And it just helps them to sell it to their bosses and whatnot that they're contracting locally. The last one that I want to talk about is in the food and beverage sector. This is a client whose main aim is to sell into the APAC region. So not based on our topic, but they have a long-term vision. And their long-term vision and directive from their Latin American headquarter has been, we want you at some point to find cheaper suppliers in terms of beverage cans, packaging materials, and we want you to build this from your Hong Kong office. So although Hong Kong was originally set up to act as the APAC sales office, it will eventually also become the APAC sourcing office, looking for cheaper materials for the manufacturing of their food packaging items and their beverage packaging items. So I really wanted to bring in case studies that are related to trade, because today's topic is concerning trade and how to build up these direct import programs via Hong Kong. So I think the best way to start today's topic is options to source in Asia. What can you do? What are we seeing in terms of market trends, in terms of what options people are choosing to source in Asia? Now, the first option that you have is a pretty easy option. It's sourcing in Asia with no local representation, okay? Now, let's face it, not every single company will have the budget available to them to set up an office in Asia, to expatriate staff in Asia, or even a budget to hire people locally to find new suppliers and build off on that. So the easiest way to go about it is to do it from home, right? Is from your home jurisdiction, connect and network with local suppliers, trading agents, logistics providers, etc. But again, the return on investment might not be so easy. Now, this was really the only solution during COVID. Hong Kong and China had such strict border controls and quarantine issues that this is what people were doing. And this is why we weren't winning any new clients for Hong Kong. It's because most of them were sourcing with no local representation. Okay. Now, sourcing in China, and I'm going to use China as the location because I'm not an expert on Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, etc. My expertise is more in the Hong Kong and China market, and that's what I know. But I use China as my example when we're thinking about sourcing for suppliers, sourcing for local warehousing, etc. The wishes of a lot of retailers or companies abroad is that they want consolidated shipments. They want people on the ground who are going to do proper quality control inspections. And they have this request, or I've seen this request grow in 2023 since the borders have opened. So just know that with no local representation, you're required now to travel yourself to China or any of the other APAC countries to inspect the suppliers, do your due diligence on the suppliers, and also then negotiate with them and handle the supply chain aspects related around it, okay? Now, a case study that I wanted to highlight is actually a Spanish company. Now, I'm highlighting this because we did offer them a service, and I want people to be aware of the service that we are offering them. We had a Spanish client who had a very tight budget, who were not ready at all to set up their own office, hire people on the ground, or do anything like that. They had a team of procurement specialists traveling in and out of Asia, attending trade shows, doing quality control tests, etc. Due to COVID, they had to pivot. They couldn't travel, or you could travel, but they weren't willing to do the quarantine for just doing a 3 or 4 day visit. So in this regard, we offered them the employer of record service. Now, this is again a way to just start off these types of business models. We were able to recruit for them a sourcing manager, a sourcing agent, if you will, that was employed by Woodburn, but worked solely for them. This sourcing agent or representative was based in Hong Kong. His objective was to travel throughout Asia, as well as go into China, obviously doing the quarantine and whatever, but with that closer distance, they weren't losing out on poor quality shipments. They had a better control over what was going on in those 3 years. And they've actually started now thinking of setting up something themselves because they are looking to hire more people that would be located in other Asian countries. Another thing I want to highlight is regardless of what business model you're doing, please remember to protect your trademarks. We did have an American company that had over 150, 250 suppliers throughout Asia, again, majority being in China. They decided to end one of the contracts during COVID, and the supplier decided to become revengeful on this and registered their trademarks with the Chinese CTMO office and customs bureaus and halted all exports that were leaving China. So, you know, people have sometimes the perception that trademarks should only be registered because you're selling into a market. It doesn't matter whether you're selling, sourcing, providing a service, trademarks should be registered all the time. The way that this company got out of it was the fact that they, luckily on many of their products, didn't have their logos on the physical product, but they had it on the packaging. And so they eliminated the packaging, shipped things in plain boxes, plain plastic bags, etc. But they did have to take the case to court and spend money on that to show and prove that the guy had done that registration in bad faith. So even if you're doing nothing in China, you have no entity, no people on the ground, just know there are bad people out there that might take advantage of you. Make sure you are registering your trademarks in this regard. Now, the next one is obviously using a sourcing agent. This is the most popular method of getting around not having to set up your own entity. It's finding an agent that is experienced in your industry and sector, experienced with your product lines. It could be a manufacturer who is familiar with what you are doing. It could be an import-export agent that is specialized in your industry and sector, and obviously has the connections and network to the suppliers within the region. It could very well be that you need a sourcing agent for every APAC jurisdiction that you are looking to go into. My feeling is always don't put all your eggs into one basket. Like we said to a client of ours who actually worked with over 25 agents throughout the Asia Pacific region. Each agent had its own speciality in a product line, and obviously a speciality in the physical country that they were in. For smaller countries, they put all their eggs in one basket to only work with one. In a country like China, they worked with several, depending on the region, the product line, and expertise and the network. So again, think about working with sourcing agents. I just think always make sure you don't put all your eggs in one basket, work with multiple ones, so that you are protecting yourself in the long term. Now, leading on to the direct import program using Hong Kong. Mark will probably touch on this, but I'll just go with the flow a little bit. Why Hong Kong? Let's face it, there is another jurisdiction in Asia that you could also use, which is Singapore. Singapore, Hong Kong, roughly the same if you look at tax rates, if you look at setting up procedures, etc. I think ultimately you have to look at where your supplier network is. If it is China, then historically and just strategically from a location perspective, it does make sense to use Hong Kong versus Singapore. I have a client right now who has decided against Hong Kong and is using Singapore. This is a US client. I think he's been advised by international tax advisors in the US that with all the bad publicity around Hong Kong, it would be better to use Singapore, even though the tax rates are higher. You need local, I mean, the cost of maintaining the entity will be higher than it is in Hong Kong. But Mark, I would love to have your feedback on that, how you answer that question during your little tidbit, because it is something that is relevant nowadays. Is people do say to me, well, which jurisdiction should I use? I say, I don't do Singapore, I just do Hong Kong. But I'm sure it's something that Mark hits on occasionally as well. But if you're just looking at a couple of the important advantages, strategic location. So like I said, look at the location of your suppliers, right? If your suppliers are in Southeast Asia and not in China, Singapore would make more sense than Hong Kong. If the majority of your suppliers are in China, Hong Kong would make more sense. A couple of the other advantages for me is because I get clients saying to me, or the original inquiry comes as, I want to set up in China, and they don't even know about the Hong Kong option. So they say, we've got a network of sourcing or suppliers in China. I therefore have to set up an entity in China. That is not the case, okay? When you are exporting from jurisdictions, you don't have to have your entity in China unless you want and have to be the exporter of record. But if that's not a must, then Hong Kong is a great alternative because it's a free market economy. It has a great liberal financial center, and I'll be touching on that a little bit when we're talking about shipping FOB and letters of credit. It's got much lower taxation than China does. It is still a gateway to China, but it's still not yet China, and we've got another 25 years before it does become China. I think also from a employment perspective, if you're looking to hire people to support this program, you will find probably better qualified, and definitely from a language perspective, people who speak better English in Hong Kong as well. Last but not least, if you just look at the rule of law and the legal system, trust me, because I do this day in, day out, it's a lot easier in Hong Kong than it is in China when you are setting up an entity and administering that entity, okay? A lot less compliance requirements. So let's look at the actual direct import program. Hold on, let's wait for the next slide. There we go. And I think this is what everybody's been waiting for, is how does this direct import program actually look like? So I'm going to start on, when you're looking at your screen, I'll start on the right side. You have your supplier network in China and in Asia. Today's topic is about Asia Direct. I also want to add in there Australia, because a lot of people also have suppliers in Australia, in New Zealand, and so really we're looking at this whole Eastern region where you might have a supplier network. You've got a new Hong Kong company that is going to centralize and control all of the purchase orders that you are making with your supplier network in China, Asia, and wherever else that might be. Your customers, and I've highlighted here your customers because really the whole point of this direct import program is that you are shipping your products directly to your customers, but you are changing the documentation that it looks like your Hong Kong company is the Asian supplier of choice. It also then hides who your individual supplier network is in China and in Asia. Okay, so I've highlighted here a little bit the flow of documentation so you can see how it works. Purchase orders from your customers can now go direct to your Hong Kong company, which then goes direct to your suppliers. Invoice from your suppliers to your Hong Kong company invoices directly to your customers. Payment then flows to Hong Kong, then to the suppliers, and you've got the direct shipment. By all means, you can have your headquarter be also the customer. You're just adding another leg in there. So you can have your headquarter be the customer, your customers placing orders with your headquarter, and the shipment still going direct to your customers. That is up to you, okay, in terms of how you are coordinating that flow. If you've got any questions at all on this, you can start adding them into the chat box, and we'll touch on the Q&A at the end. Now, what are the goals of the direct import program? The goal is that you're sourcing from Asia and you're reselling those products to your home country or to third-party destinations where your customers are actually based, okay? For larger customers that are purchasing full containers, right? That's where direct shipment is perfect for them. If you are selling small quantities, the question is it better that that inventory goes to your headquarter to then be separated out and sold to your customers or not? You can, of course, sell small quantities with direct shipment. It's just a matter of understanding the logistical costs and whether that makes sense or not. If you want to centralize your sourcing functions in Asia, then you can do that. Now, one of the biggest reasons companies do that is because they want to hide from their customers who the individual suppliers are. Meaning that if you centralize your sourcing functions in Hong Kong, through Hong Kong, all of the shipping documents, everything is in the Hong Kong company name. So your customers only know your Hong Kong company name. They don't know who the individual suppliers are. The fourth one is if you need to have better control over quality and therefore you want to hire QC inspectors yourself. Of course, you can outsource this still, but again, if you want better control and you want to have this in-house, then you have that ability to do so. If you need to have better control over receipts and payments and understand the accounts receivable, accounts payables, and you want to have proper listings separate from your headquarter books, again, you have that visibility through that Hong Kong company. And then obviously, if you want to sell on FOB Asian terms, then that is where your ability is to be able to do that through Hong Kong as well. So what are the key features of this direct import program? Now, I know that Invest Hong Kong's objective is for people to set up physical offices in Hong Kong and to also hire people in Hong Kong, which all depends on the scale that you're at, okay? So if you are starting out this direct import program, for me, the selling point is that you can outsource everything. You can create this structure without having a physical office, without actually having any fixed costs, because you can outsource these functions to companies like myself. And I'm tuning my own horn in this presentation. I am using Woodburn as the service provider. I do want to highlight there are thousands of service providers in Hong Kong that offer this service. It's a matter of choosing a service provider you like and whether you like their fee structure and costing, etc. But you can outsource all of this to them, that you don't have to have a physical office. You don't have to have headcount yet. Again, my goal with every single client is growth and scale, okay? You might be starting off small and starting off with a couple of transactions per month to eventually, I don't know, 500, 600 transactions like my Mexican client has, where actually they do need to have at least 2 dedicated staff to manage all of the paperwork. Okay, so it really depends on the level that you are at. But the key feature is you can start off without any high fixed costs. Just depends where you are at in your growth and scaling up phase. Now you can sell either FOB or X warehouse. You have this option now available to you. In addition to that, you can manage letters of credit and trade financing in Hong Kong. And this is where I say the banks are a little bit more liberal. Let me also make a disclaimer. It's really hard to open an account in Hong Kong, but once that account is open, to run it and maintain it, it's a lot easier than it is in China, okay? The third is the trade documentation and liaising with the vendors in Asia. So again, you can have your own dedicated staff in Hong Kong that does this, right? You can have merchandisers that manage the trade documentation and are liaising with the different suppliers throughout the APAC region, or you can outsource that function. You can also then address quality concerns with suppliers, especially if you then do bring in-house QC representatives. Again, you can outsource that initially or even bring those staff in. And then obviously I want to highlight the tax regime, okay? So again, disclaimer, we are not setting up a Hong Kong company to avoid paying taxes. We are setting up the Hong Kong company in order to be able to centralize and control all of the sourcing functions that are in the APAC region. We obviously want to create a tax optimized structure. And the beauty of Hong Kong is that on the first 2 million Hong Kong dollars of net profit, you're paying 8.25% profits tax, and everything above that is at 16.5%. Currently, with the current regulations, you can still apply for tax exemption for offshore transactions. Offshore transactions means that the that, again, you're keeping a virtual office in Hong Kong, no headcount, no physical address, and inventory is not flowing through Hong Kong either. That's why the direct shipments are vital if you want to apply for that 0%. But I do, again, just want to highlight 8.25% compared to other jurisdictions is great, okay? And again, to avoid suspicion with the Hong Kong tax authorities, it is advisable to make a margin. Obviously, if you are selling to your headquarter, please do make a margin. Think about transfer pricing. If you're selling directly to your customers, the margin will then be kept in Hong Kong. Again, something you have to think about is, what do you want to do with that profit that is sitting in Hong Kong? Is it going to be for further investment? What do you want to use it for? I had a company out of Australia talk to me about this direct import program and whether it would be advantageous for him. He's a sole trader. He has his own business. His customers are in Australia. He has a huge supplier network in China and APAC. From my perspective, it made no sense for him to now build up a Hong Kong company, because in the end of the day, he's living in Australia. He wants to have his money in Australia, okay? He's not looking at any types of further investment. So really look at your own individual situation to see whether this makes sense. So how does the program work? I think the first thing you have to realize, and I'm using Woodburn's approach to this, so other service providers might have a different approach. I just want to highlight what we do and how we work with our clients. So every direct import program solution is tailor-made to the goals and objectives of the company, right? There might be little tweaks that we have to look at. Depends on the size that you are in terms of your supplier network and the number of transactions that are running through the company. We will also then advise at that point, do you need headcount? Do you need dedicated staff? And how do you want to support that dedicated team? If you are small and you don't want to hire staff and you want to kind of have this virtually running, then the idea is that Woodburn incorporates your Hong Kong company with you as the shareholder, okay? You choose then who are the directors, open up the bank account, and then with our staff, we handle the day-to-day running of your operations. That means receiving orders directly from your retail customers, which also means we would have a dedicated email address based on your company name, so that your customers think we are your team. We're handling all of the commercial matters. We're helping then your parent company manage the supply chain. We're dealing with the banks, etc. So if you look at the full trading arm, we're dealing with logistics, order, bank, etc. Right? Now, if you don't want to outsource this to a service provider, this actually means you've got dedicated staff who are doing these functions on your behalf. All right. Now, the whole point of this program is from an image perspective that you become an Asian exporter, right? And it means then you also have greater flexibility to create new sales channels globally. So you aren't just tied with the existing sales channels you've got. You can be open and flexible to new ideas and think out of the box. As an Asian exporter, what can I do now to garner new clients? It could also be that you want to re-import and sell to Asian customers, right? The tendency is people only think, okay, I'm a Latin American company, my customers are in the Americas, and they don't really have the vision yet of thinking we may have customers at some point in Asia or even in Europe. So, like I said, through that methodology, you can open new markets anywhere. You can then also sell ex-warehouse or an FOB Asian port basis. And the key by doing that means that you are not holding any inventory. You also don't even have to manage warehousing because you're selling containers worth of product. If your shipments are smaller in size, that's then another issue that has to be managed and attacked. So very briefly, the benefits, again, looking at it from a tax perspective, the rates in Hong Kong are very attractive. flexibility in terms of FOB Asian port or ex-warehouse. Shipments go direct. You can free up capital by having letters of credit. It can help with the financing. It means that you don't have to pay anything up front. Again, it just helps you in terms of the whole cash management aspect. Variable cost. Now, again, if you are not planning to hire people, rent an office space, and have fixed costs, then, you've got a transaction-based business. And the administering of that Hong Kong company depends on the service provider you choose and what are their associated fees related to it. Control, again, people are losing control sometimes in their head office as their supplier network increases. If you want to have people on the ground that are supervising that supplier network, maintaining that supplier network, following up with payments, quality control issues, etc., you have the ability to do that. Again, there's lower risk because if this doesn't pan out, you've got no staff initially, you've got no lease agreement initially, you just have to terminate with your service provider, decide whether you want to keep the Hong Kong company. One thing we have noticed over COVID is that a lot of people have frozen their businesses in Hong Kong, waiting for the economy to increase and get better. And again, a lot of those inquiries from 2023 were of people who had Hong Kong companies, wanted to reactivate their bank accounts and start transacting again. So again, for me, very positive outlook when people are starting to look at things like that. Growth, again, this is a whole objective from my side, is how do you grow your business, right? We feel that Hong Kong can offer that flexibility in the APAC region to build new sales channels for new product lines, for different markets, and again, be perceived as the Asian exporter, the Asian supplier, right? It's a whole different marketing strategy suddenly when you have that available to you. And last but not least, I think what I want people to get out of their minds, because maintaining a company anywhere in the world can be tedious. Okay, I'm fully aware of that. I think the beauty of Hong Kong and the structures that you can set up in Hong Kong compared to China, which is what I know, is that you would have the ability to focus on growth, outsource and delegate everything that is administrative related. Until again, you're at a size where it makes sense to hire people. Usually that threshold for me is you look at your service provider's monthly fees. If that fee is the cost of a salary, why not hire somebody that works 100% for you and can help build up your business? Now, I've added this section overnight, avoiding the most common pitfalls when sourcing in Asia, because I just had a client of mine yesterday email me saying they have 2 suppliers that they've been working with in China. They made down payments, products were never produced, money was not refunded, and the email was, Christina, we're going to take them to arbitration. Funnily enough, the place of arbitration in the contract is Vienna. Don't know how that's going to work in terms of arbitration with a Chinese supplier. I basically said to them, I think you need to talk to a lawyer locally in China to see what options you have. I have a feeling you may have to even have somebody visit these locations of these suppliers to see whether they really exist. So I've added this last minute section because, again, I want people to avoid the most common pitfalls when sourcing in Asia. And again, this just relates back. If you've got people on the ground supporting your business, this is how you can avoid the majority of these pitfalls. All right. Now, I do understand COVID prevented all of this. Maybe budgeting also prevented that. Now borders are open. At a minimum, make sure you are preparing well. It is really sad for me to see emails like that coming in where people are doing their best to vet suppliers and then money is taken away from them, right? So we want to try and minimize this as much as possible. But they're whether it's China, it could also be in Vietnam, it could be in Thailand, it can be in Malaysia. So if you are setting up this type of Asian structure, let's be as prepared as possible. So proper preparation and research, for me, the biggest thing is try and visit them. Are they real? Look at their manufacturing process, understand what they can do for you. You also need to compare and highlight to them your specific wishes. So even before starting researching suppliers, make sure you have your criteria and key sets that you want to look at when you're trying to find these suppliers, okay? And again, going to trade shows, physically meeting the people face-to-face, going then to their physical locations to see whether the factory really does exist is key to all of this. And now you actually can do it, okay? So due diligence is, I don't know, it's the foundation, okay? Make sure also you've got WeChat. If you don't, download WeChat. I actually just found out statistics actually that were fascinating. The two largest markets who utilize WeChat after China are India, which I haven't talked about today, India and Malaysia, because of the large Chinese community there. So I do believe that even WeChat is not just for China. It can also be used for other jurisdictions, but WhatsApp or Zoom or whatever else is important, but nothing beats meeting people in person, okay? And again, I don't blame my client who contacted me yesterday. They couldn't meet the suppliers during COVID. Why they did not make a trip in 2023, I don't know, but they didn't. So please make sure you're focusing on that. Quotations, again, really important. Make sure you are comparing pricing, and that you're not just putting all your eggs in one basket and getting quotes from one provider, one supplier. Don't also make the assumption that the lowest price is the best price. Again, going physically to these locations to view quality, to get testing, to get samples and all of that is, again, vital. Besides mandatory testing requirements, make sure that everything with packaging is also taken care of by your suppliers, as well as product labeling. And if they don't do it, make sure you're finding a provider that can cater to that for you. Last but not least, it's quality control. Okay, we want smooth transactions. We want to make sure that when the shipment arrives, that it's all well and good. Now, I have had clients where quality control has not been an issue of the supplier. It's been an issue with logistics providers and warehousing providers. So please also keep that in the back of your mind when you are looking at logistics providers and warehousing providers. You are looking at how they're maintaining products. I have a lot of F&B clients, and their biggest issue has been that products have been not kept refrigerated, and hence things go to waste. Or if you have a requirement that the logistics provider should do the QC on your behalf, make sure they open more than just one carton. Again, there have been cases where you have one carton by chance that is perfect and everything else is smashed and broken and whatnot. So, you know, logistics providers are not necessarily QC experts. Make sure you are working with QC experts who have engineering expertise and know what quality assurance is, and, you know, doing testing before production, during production, after production, and even checking things as they get into the trucks to go to the port, inspections of goods going into the containers, and all of that. Better to be safe than sorry. To finish up my section, just 10 key considerations that I want to talk about when sourcing in Asia. One is looking at control and communication. Communication is fundamental. Another is turning a blind eye. I'm sick and tired of hearing people say, well, that's China. No, we're living in 2024 now. Things have matured. You need to take responsibility if somebody's not doing their job well. If your gut is telling you that you are getting yourself into a very ethical situation where it's not right, your instinct is to say, back off, follow your gut on this. There are a lot of one-man shows out there. There are a lot of new graduates that are heading over to China currently that are looking for jobs. Please don't hire inexperienced staff. Work with people that can provide you with an added value and who know the market well enough. You're going to run into difficulties with people who are just starting up. And it will just take time to train them and all of that as well. Cultural differences. Look, I'm an expert on China, but I can tell you now the culture between China, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, it's all a huge mesh of different ways of doing business. So try and understand the different markets. Know your supplier due diligence. Make sure you create a standard operating procedure on how you're going to do due diligence on suppliers, both new ones as well as existing ones. Manage subcontractors. A lot of people think that they are not subcontracting, but actually their suppliers are subcontracting. You're just not aware of it. Try to get as much insight on who is subcontracting and how it's affecting your supply chain or even the quality of your products. Number 8 is really be aware of your end clients, knowing your supplier network. And I do want to say that is the main reason why our clients set up the direct import program, is so that their end customers don't know who their supplier network is. That is your blood and sweat. That is the work you have invested in to find that supplier network. Don't give it freely to your customers. Government interactions really depends on the jurisdictions that you're planning on working in. But obviously, if you are in, I say, sensitive product categories like food and beverage, understand for each jurisdiction what are the regulations for export of those products. And obviously, you know, if there are abnormal, unexpected payment methodologies, like you're paying into somebody's personal account, which does happen quite a bit in the sourcing world, please do be aware of that. That should be part of your gut instinct and ethical situation that you have to look at to realize something is not right. So I'm going to end there, and I'm going to hand it over to Mark. Mark, I'm going to stop my share, and you can go ahead and share yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Right. Let me just try and make that large. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just to briefly introduce myself. So my name is Mark Headley, Deputy Head of Investment Promotion here in London. So just briefly, in terms of what Invest Hong Kong is there to do. I mean, we're a government department in Hong Kong that promotes Hong Kong as a place for companies from overseas to come and invest, come and set up an operation and start trading. So we have a global network of offices. So I think currently 34 global offices, a number of which are in Europe, and obviously here in London, we have a small team of people to engage directly with businesses to help them understand the opportunities really that exist in Hong Kong. Obviously on the Hong Kong side, we also have a large presence there, and that's where our sector teams are located. So we cover sort of 9 key sector areas, and that's everything from luxury and retail through to, you know, financial services, technology, healthcare, all these different areas. I also spent a number of years at the China-Britain Business Council, and also a number of years living in China. So I have sort of direct experience of working with companies, both selling into China, but also managing their supply chains in Hong Kong and China. So I'm not going to go through, obviously, Christina's been through some of the more detailed aspects of how you might manage a import program from through Hong Kong. I mean, I wanted to kind of pick up on a few of the points that Christina mentioned, and really kind of talk about why we see Hong Kong as being a valuable place for businesses to base their sourcing operations. And I think probably just to start with, and Christine kind of touched on this at the beginning, is just Hong Kong's location. I think it's quite strategically central location within the kind of Asia Pacific, Central Asia region. And if you sort of, you draw that, you draw that sort of radius around Hong Kong, and you're actually within 5 hours flight of half the world's population. You're four hours away from all of Asia's key markets. And although Singapore, I mean, we try not to compare Singapore and Hong Kong too much because they are quite different in terms of what they offer. But certainly I would definitely emphasize the point that Christina made around that proximity to Northern Asia, particularly China, and thinking about Southern China in particular, which is where so much of global supply chains, whether that's in electronics or furniture, toys, whatever it happens to be, that is just where the China's manufacturing heartlands are. So if you're looking to manage suppliers from that part of China, it's literally now from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, I think it's a 20-minute train ride compared to a 4-hour flight from Singapore. So clearly there's a strategic advantage to being in Hong Kong, but also that international connectivity. The Hong Kong does have one of the busiest airports in the world, so it's well connected with both east and west, and that just makes it easier from a transit perspective. There's no visas either, so whereas mainland China, you'd be looking at, if you're going for an extended stay, you'd be looking at visas and so on. For Hong Kong, you get 6 months of visa-free time that you can spend there, which makes things easier. On the kind of, I mean, these are just kind of some of the advantages, some of the why Hong Kong's, and we'll kind of I'll run through a couple of them. But I think just in terms of one of the questions that we often get asked is around the political system that exists in Hong Kong. And there's a lot of confusion, to be quite frank, around Hong Kong's relationship with China. I think that's been exacerbated in the last couple of years because of some of the issues that Hong Kong's had, in 2017, 2018, etc. And obviously during the COVID period, I think fewer people have travelled to Hong Kong, so it may not be as familiar to people as perhaps it was in the past. But essentially, Hong Kong operates under a one country, two systems principle. So that means that from a governance perspective, governance of Hong Kong is entirely devolved. So it sets its own laws, it sets its own taxes. The regulatory regime is very different from the mainland. And that's guaranteed, as Christina alluded to, up until 2047. But actually, the indications are that there is no real appetite from Beijing to see change beyond 2047. And actually this year, when Xi Jinping visited Hong Kong, he did indicate that, there's no reason, the words he used with, there's no reason to change that beyond 2047. So yes, another 20 plus years of a stable business environment, but beyond that, it's very likely that Hong Kong will retain some level of autonomy, if not entire autonomy beyond that. So I think that can sort of put your mind at rest in terms of the stability of the system there. And of course, what that means in practice is that you can trade openly. It's a very open trading environment. It's a very open business environment. Hong Kong ranks very highly in terms of the ease of doing business lists that are produced. I mean, Christina mentioned the low tax system. It's also a simple tax system, I think, which there's far less bureaucracy involved in setting up and operating a business in Hong Kong than there would be compared to even the UK or the US, where tax regimes tend to be more complex, and certainly compared to mainland China, setting up a business takes a lot longer on the mainland than it would do in Hong Kong, where actually registering a company is a relatively quick thing to do. So I think there's that side of things. There's far fewer, there's far fewer kind of restrictions in terms of the sectors that you can operate in. And there's a lot of affinities with the UK system, given the fact that Hong Kong was at one point a British overseas jurisdiction. The other thing that just doesn't often get mentioned enough is that Hong Kong's a great place. It's a really fun place to travel to. It's got great nightlife, great bars, great restaurants. It has a real energy to it. And although I think that sort of during the COVID period, it kind of perhaps maybe because some of the expat community left and there were those travel restrictions in place, that was kind of toned down a bit. But I think what we've seen this year is that that's beginning to come back again, that it is a more vibrant place again, and more people traveling to Hong Kong, a lot more events happening this year. And I think that it's getting its dynamism back again. So I think that, for many people who aren't familiar with Asia, being in Hong Kong is quite comfortable because it's English speaking. There's a lot of creature comforts there that you don't get in every Asian country. So I think that's also something that you can, bear in mind when you're thinking about where to base yourselves. I won't dwell on this because obviously Christina's already mentioned the tax rate. Obviously, there's a low tax regime, relatively speaking, compared to most other Asian markets. Also no VAT, things like that. Salaries taxes tend to be quite low as well. So if you do have staff there, or you're planning to relocate there, then that can also make things very attractive. As Christina mentioned, I mean, the looking at global GDP and global economy this year's, it's looking like it's going to be a very challenging year globally, and certainly in China that's the case. Actually, last year we did see a slight uptick in terms of the total number of companies in Hong Kong from overseas. So it's just over 9,000 now. Although the total number of regional headquarters did drop slightly. There's about 600, just over 600 UK companies already in Hong Kong. So it's quite a vibrant place already. A lot of foreign businesses located there. Again, that just adds to the international feel of the city compared to some jurisdictions. And also, what we're seeing is that there's a real growth in the number of technology companies and startups. And actually, this is just a survey that came out a couple of weeks ago. You can see that a significant proportion of the startups in Hong Kong are actually in e-commerce, supply chain, and logistics. So actually, what that means is that there are service providers there, whether that's technology providers, supply chain businesses, marketing companies. And there's a lot of that expertise and that skill set that sits in Hong Kong. So actually, if you are putting a team together and you need those supply chain or those digital professionals to manage your global e-commerce, I was speaking to a company just yesterday that they've set up in Hong Kong, and they're actually using Hong Kong to manage a lot of their digital content for their global business because of the English language capabilities and so on. So I think that's makes for a very dynamic place in order to hire the relevant staff for your business as well. And I think just thinking about Hong Kong's relationship with the mainland, yes, we have one country, two systems, but Hong Kong's also part of this thing called the Greater Bay. And the Greater Bay policy is really around improving the infrastructure, having more integration across the border with the 11 cities that make up the Greater Bay Area. It's 86 million people. And as I say, this is really China's manufacturing heartland. So a lot of the traditional supply chains are already in this region. So being in Hong Kong, again, it just enables you to access those suppliers quickly and easily. And I think over time, what you'll begin to see is more integration around things like use of a digital currency, cross-border payments becoming easier, these type of incremental developments as part of this Greater Bay strategy, whereby cities in the Greater Bay are being liberalized to some degree around things like finance and payments and so on, which again, it just makes things a bit easier where you are trading with companies on the mainland. The Belt and Road, I think, is important in terms of the fact that, yes, there's the Belt and Road as in terms of the transport connectivity with across the sort of Central Asia, but also within the ASEAN region, where Hong Kong is very well placed for. So Hong Kong's sort of well positioned in terms of financing Belt and Road. It's a centre for legal dispute resolution. So, for example, if you're dealing with suppliers or customers in different parts of the ASEAN region or across the Central Asia region, you might have suppliers in Eastern Europe as well. Hong Kong can be used in order to, as a hub, for managing contracts and things like this, and I think that makes a lot of sense, and particularly if you're dealing with Chinese companies, many of which are also diversifying outside mainland China and moving their operations into places like Vietnam and Thailand and so on. So Hong Kong sort of it's a neutral territory to some degree in terms of managing that. The other thing to mention is that there are various trade agreements as well. So there's the CEPA, which is the agreement between mainland and Hong Kong, and this is effectively it means that there are zero tariffs, and also there's an agreement on services as well. So if you're engaged in providing services across the border, then that's also subject to certain preferences and so on. Obviously, this applies probably more to the exports from Hong Kong into the mainland China, but it's also important to be aware of that if you have a base in Hong Kong, you can potentially take advantage of that. Also, RCEP, which Hong Kong is due to accede to in the near future, which is actually the world's largest trading bloc, accounts for a third of the world's population, and all of those major ASEAN countries plus Australia are all part of it. And it's accounting for over, I think, about 90% of tariffs across these regions are going to be eliminated through this trade deal. So by being based in Hong Kong, you are therefore able to take advantage of these import tariff arrangements between these different countries, which I think is also a major advantage. Obviously, in Hong Kong, I mean, our team, we look after these 9 sector areas. So if you need some advice around specific sectors or areas that you're working in, we can help with that. There's also an organization called the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, which runs a lot of the trade shows in Hong Kong and supports Hong Kong-based businesses to expand internationally. And they have various programs as well, both on the mainland and helping companies expand from Hong Kong into other ASEAN countries. So I think that Hong Kong, yes, it can be seen as a sourcing office for bringing products from the UK into Europe, but also it's, for many businesses, it's about that global expansion, and there are huge opportunities to expand into the wider sort of APAC region, given the scale at which some of those markets are evolving. And so I think that, yes, there's opportunities to also take advantage of the services that the HKTDC provide, as well as Invest Hong Kong. And finally, I just wanted to mention Hong Kong's capabilities in terms of logistics and e-commerce. I mean, because it's a free trade zone, effectively, it's a great place to have inventory stored for distribution into China and around the wider APAC region, where you may need to have inventory there or some kind of processing facility to do that within a free trade zone makes a lot of sense. But also because you have the second one of the busiest airports in the world. It's I think the 9th biggest container port in the world. It has all of that infrastructure and technology, and the speedy customs clearance in and out and so on, and that growing integration with the mainland, where you can clear products in Hong Kong for China and vice versa. And it's a very seamless process in the way that all of that works. So I think that's another just a logistical sort of practical reason for having your logistics managed from Hong Kong. So I think that's probably all I have to say. If you would like to speak more, obviously we provide companies help through the whole process on how to go about setting up in Hong Kong, sector advice, regulatory advice, links to service providers. We'll meet you if you're coming to Hong Kong. Come and have a cup of tea, meet with our team, all those kind of things. And it's all free. So we're a government department, so we don't charge. And yeah, my contact details as well, if anyone wants to follow up with me afterwards. And with that, I'll hand back to Christine. I think we're going to do a bit of Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Actually, there are no questions that have popped in. So if anybody does have any questions that they would like answered or anything like that, please do. Now is the opportunity to do it. I just wanted to reflect a little bit on a couple of things that Mark also mentioned. It's the feeling on the ground in Hong Kong. I mean, I have just spent 3 weeks there. I spent all of Christmas and New Year there. And there are a couple of things I want to highlight from a political standpoint. You do not feel any political turmoil. So if you are thinking or you're reading a lot of things in in the news about Hong Kong or whatever else, I mean, there is no political turmoil on the ground. Protests have ended. It is business as usual. Okay. Mark also said it's a fantastic place to live. I'm born and raised there, lived there majority of my youth. It really is a fantastic place to end up. I think Mark was highlighting more of the restaurants and the nightlife. I would love to touch on the nature. People always make the assumption that Hong Kong is this big bustling city. I've done some of the most amazing hikes and nature trails. It has a little bit of everything in there. One of the questions that have popped in is, why are companies choosing to use Dubai as a hub instead of Hong Kong in recent years? I can only give you my opinion, which is I think Dubai was very liberal during COVID. They had no quarantine regulations. Also, Dubai is tax exempt in general. So I do know that, I think from my perspective, when Mark was showing the statistic about the regional headquarters, from what I've understood, a lot of regional headquarters in Hong Kong either moved to Dubai or either moved to Singapore. And that was really in relation to COVID and the restrictions around COVID. I don't see Dubai as an advantage if you are really, I mean, Dubai is still an 8-hour flight to Hong Kong. I don't know if people know that. I've done that trip a number of times. It's still 8 hours. Of course, it has its own regulations, but own tax advantages and all of that. But I think you have to, I mean, there has to be more reasons why you're choosing a location, not just tax and whatnot. It has to also make sense for everybody. Mark, I don't know if you've got 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and I just saw there was another question popped up around why some large companies choose Singapore over Hong Kong. So maybe I can kind of try take them in the same breath.
Yes.
I mean, on Dubai, I mean, Dubai is really interesting because I think there's a lot of growth in that market, that part of the world, right? So the sort of Middle East and Africa sort of markets are certainly have a very youthful demographic, very wealthy. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And I think that probably for some businesses that are aligned to the opportunities within those regions, it probably makes sense to have location there. And obviously, as Christine said, the sort of governments in those areas have offered a lot of preferential incentives for overseas companies to come. However, I think from a production manufacturing perspective, sourcing, I don't necessarily see that as a trend. I think it's still Asia Pacific is still perhaps where a lot of those supply chains are located. So I wouldn't necessarily think that they're the same businesses that are shifting in that direction. With regards to Singapore, I mean, again, we're very loath to compare Singapore with Hong Kong because actually the largest corporations have presence in both markets because they recognize that the strategic advantage of Singapore around the ASEAN region, particularly the Singapore, the sort of Malaysia, Indonesian markets, which are very large and growing very quickly, is obvious, and plus the proximity to Australia and New Zealand. I think that there was a big shift during the COVID period because of the restrictions that were in place in China and Hong Kong. So I think that was we did see a drift. People that didn't want to be locked down all the time wanted to move their families somewhere that was a bit more a bit easier and for travel and so on. But there's been a gradual switch back. Companies are moving back. I think the issues that are complicating things at the moment.
Mark, I just want to rephrase that.
Yeah.
When you say switching back, I want to clarify that. I think personally, companies never closed down in Hong Kong. So if you are saying people have moved out, nobody liquidated their companies in Hong Kong and shut down operations.
Yeah.
They have downsized their operation. The executives might have relocated to Dubai and Singapore. And I think in many instances, it was sort of the executive decided, do I want to be in Dubai with my family or do I want to be in Singapore with my family? But when we are talking about operations, I do not see anybody shutting operations. Even when you are talking about China and multinationals exiting China, maybe executives are leaving China, but nobody is liquidating their businesses and shutting down their operations in China. It'd be ridiculous to do so.
I think there's just a genuine, we live in very unstable times, right? I mean, absolutely. The world is and I think that businesses have to diversify their risk by having presence in multiple markets, so that where there are challenges in one market, you have capacity elsewhere and so on.
You're going to where you want to prioritize for that year, and if the priority is to focus on the Middle East, absolutely head on over to Dubai and bring those executives there. While I was in Hong Kong, I met with a lot of senior executives and friends, to be quite honest. And COVID has really, from a psychological perspective, impacted them. I met one family, and I say family because it was a family decision that they moved from Hong Kong to Singapore. Now, due to everything being open in Hong Kong, the husband is relocating every 2 weeks, traveling in and out, right? It was a family decision. Another family decided to actually move to the UK during COVID. Now the husband has relocated back, but when you have children that are stuck in school, you can't just pick them up and leave. So COVID was really a familial situation, and executives were making a lot of decisions based off of that. I don't believe operations were shutting down. And like Mark said, I think it's more of a priority aspect. If you see Southeast Asia growing for your industry and sector, build something in Singapore. If you see your supply chain being in East Asia, Hong Kong is a great location. If Middle East is something you want to focus on, then you got to go to the Middle East. Listen, when you ask why is that, we can only give you our opinions. Nothing is factual. We're seeing what the trends are and what's happening from perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would encourage people to do is to go and, you know, to visit and to spend some time out there. And I think as soon as you're on the ground and you start speaking to businesses, suppliers, service providers, you really get a sense for what the opportunities are, you know, are there risks, how big are they, and try not to just make decisions based on conjecture, you know, third-hand information through the media or through people that you know who knows someone. You know, it's important to get out there and explore the opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Nothing else has popped in, so I think we're going to leave it like that because we've passed the hour already. If you guys are looking to set up in Hong Kong, I'm going to provide you my calendar link. And I will also, in my follow-up email, which will have the link to the recording, I will also provide you with Mark's email address. In fact, I'll keep you in copy, Mark, so that you receive the email yourself and people can reach out to you directly as well. And just to finish off today, again, if you want to join me on WeChat, please do so. There are a lot of Hong Kong people in WeChat as well. I want to highlight that. So don't hesitate to reach out. And next week, we are talking about brand expansion and trademark registrations. I did touch on that in today's presentation. We will be going in more detail about that and the importance of that as well next week. So I do want to thank everybody for joining us. Stay tuned for next week's roundtable. Mark, thank you for participating. And again, thanks to Invest Hong Kong as well for joining.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Christina.
Take care. Bye.